right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining this very exciting panel. I'm very excited to speak with folks that we had the privilege of working through the course of Project Guardian. So as was introduced earlier on, Project Guardian is a collaborative initiative. We had the opportunity now. I think I was just speaking to Fernando off stage, 3 years and counting. So we have about 40 financial institutions, policymakers, and associations, really the chance to really work and tackle on this topic of asset tokenization. So what you see on the stage here is a representative of the diversity that we have within Project Guardian, whether it's fellow regulators, asset manager, commercial bank, and also emerging and financial institutions who are looking to transform the landscape that we have today. So what we'll cover today are a few themes, just a kind of a reflection or stock take of where things are, what's been achieved, and also taking a view of what's to come in the year ahead. So we have the privilege of having my esteemed panelists who will take us through this topic. We'll start off perhaps with just a quick introduction for each and every one of them, just for them to introduce who they are, what they are working on, specifically on this topic around asset tokenization. So I'm going to start from my furthest and one of the first founding members of being participating in Project Guardian. We'll start off with Fernando. So Fernando, why don't you introduce yourself, tell everyone what you're working on and what inspires you about this space, please.
Yeah, first of all, let me thank you for having us. Actually, I have another founding member sitting next to me from the private sector, Mr. Kwee John. And the reason that we joined Project Guardian as founding members is that we needed to validate certain assumptions that we were making, that we could actually tokenize securities and distribute such securities to retail investors in our case. Because SBI Digital Holdings is part of SBI, which is mainly known as a retail broker. We have 15 million customers, and we saw a lot of potential in this captive client base. But before we distribute anything in a new format at a scale, we need to convince not only internal stakeholders within my board, risk management department, compliance, you name it, it's also the regulators. And to make things even more complicated, what we had in mind is to originate some of these products outside of Japan. So you're outsourcing a product outside of Japan, different jurisdiction. It can be common law, which do not have in Japan, and then we want to distribute that to retail. And regulators are, get really nervous, right, when you offer a new thing to retail players. So before we couldn't even get started, we needed that validation. So we joined, a Project Guardian with DBS and JP Morgan back in the day. We did a number of live trades. We did all the heavy lifting. We implemented risk controls because the regulators wouldn't tell us what we had to do because it had not been done before, right? So all that was super successful, and with the thought leadership of Alan and other people from the MAS, we're able to bring other regulators to the fold. The Bank of Japan, the FSA, and now also friends from FIMA and the Swiss National Bank. Because of this validation that we got, now as SBI and SBI Digital Holdings, our focus now is commercialization. We are trying to remove some hurdles that are still there, and we'll talk about later if we have time. But the validation phase is over. The technology works. I would argue that it will eventually be fully commoditized. Now we are ready to offer the products that people want in whatever format they want and sourced from anywhere in the world. That's our vision, our focus. And thank you, Alan, again, for making this possible.
So thanks for the collaboration. Kwee John, another founding member.
I remembered back in 2003, actually, having a conversation with Alan. It was in 2002. Yeah. When we said, is it possible for us to create a DeFi market for current securities that are being traded? Could we tokenize fixed income and have that trade in a decentralized pool? Because today the trading is done on an OTC basis, and we said, could it be done where the use case was really about atomic trading, settlement, and custody all happening at the same time? That was the vision, because we said with blockchain technology, this is something that is very possible. And DBS at that time have already started a digital exchange, converting fiat to crypto. Now we have 6 cryptocurrencies that we can convert from 4 fiat. And we thought it is important to take the next step and push the envelope to determine if we could have it an automated trading with automated market making. And that was actually a very, very good exercise because we found out that you can actually tokenize securities. You can achieve atomic trading, atomic settlement, atomic custody. For many of us who are in the industry for a long time, to reach that level of sophistication where we are suffering from T+2 kind of settlement cycle, it's amazing. And that gave us a lot of confidence to get on to the next year's projects and so on and so forth. I think it also gave birth to the fact that some of you may have heard about the Layer 0 protocol project. That also came about because through Project Guardian, we realized that while public blockchains are great, the costs on public blockchain fluctuates. And so for financial institutions, it is a problem because we wouldn't know how much the next trade is going to cost depending on where the prices are going to be on public blockchain. And so having something that is more stable in pricing is important, more regulated, and as well as more protected in some sense. So it's been a great journey, and we've learned a lot.
Thank you. Peter?
I'd probably like to start, Alan, as well, by thanking you for your leadership and drive in this area. It's incredible to have a regulator who supports us in our endeavours. I'd probably like to start by, why am I here, describing a quote from the FT, which is, I was quoted, or my firm was quoted, as the largest frog in a boiling pot. A sentiment around really my industry is on the death throes and is doomed. I guess this frog has jumped out of the pot and is trying to make a difference. And I think, why does that matter? So I think we're a relatively simple business as an asset manager. We're a fiduciary business. We take client money in, we take their cash, we invest it, and our aim is to grow their wealth. We've typically done that in 2 ways, by having a separate portfolio, have a lot of money, and a fund. And I guess the argument is, well, why does that have to change? Why does that matter? And I think there's lots of things that are impacting that environment. There's a move to passive, which is, as an active asset manager, has changed our landscape. Passive is now 25% of global AUM. It is only 4% of global revenue. So I think that tells you where passive is going. Me and Alan had the conversation around, we believe that will be a commodity token in the new world and should be frictionless and almost cheap, which is great for clients and for creating portfolios. I think the other lens is that over that period of time as well, private assets and less companies are listing, so the addressable market has become constrained from a public markets perspective, and that number is now 25% of AUM, but 50-ish, nearly pushing 60% of revenue. And the middle is getting squeezed. So there's less and less money to be made from active asset management, certainly at the scale we used to offer and the way we used to offer it. I think the other main reason we're here is because we fundamentally believe in a theory which is from a professor at Chicago Booth, which is called proximity theory. And that argument is that in all industries, across all walks of life, the technology and the extent of technology means that production is happening closer and closer to the point of consumption. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'd say in financial services, we're probably in the dark ages. That's still happening way down here, locked away. So I guess we fundamentally believe, and I guess the other key game changer is AI, but AI, data, and DLT are the future for our industry. And our aim of joining Guardian was we wanted to fundamentally democratize our industry. So the services offered to an institutional client should be available to an individual at a fraction of the cost. And I want to go from today, I think I provide 3 services, which is I'm a stock picker, I provide portfolio management, and I enable people to navigate the financial markets. I provide the access to that market through systems and access to the very complicated chain of how that operates on very different systems and very different settlement processes, and I provide an insurance policy. I guess tomorrow I want to be a stock picker. I want my services to be available in that network, and I want the network to deal with that. And I fundamentally believe this technology will help us deliver them.
So turning to Sarah, but let me start by thanking Sarah and the FCA for being a very key partner in this journey. Because I think what's exceptional about Guardian is the ability to bring both regulators and the industry working together, and it wouldn't be possible without the collaboration with the FCA and other fellow regulators. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Alan. It's fantastic to be here. I'm Sarah Pritchard. I'm Executive Director for Markets and International at the UK's Financial Conduct Authority. So what that means in practice is responsibility for all of our regulatory framework and our regulatory policy, as well as our supervision. And we're delighted, absolutely delighted to be sat here on the sofa next to, you didn't tell me you were a frog in the green room, but absolutely delighted to be here because as a pro-innovation regulator in the UK and one that is outcomes focused, we are very much trying to make sure that we are looking forward, seeing how markets are developing, want to develop, and whether the regulatory framework that exists remains fit and how it might need to be adapted. I think as a regulator, you always have to be careful to go straight to rules, which is why we've made a big pivot in the UK to be outcomes focused. And clearly in this space, the ability to be an active participant with industry and with international counterparts, so with yourselves, Alan, and your colleagues, has been absolutely fantastic. The work through Guardian, which we were pleased to support, the report that came out on Monday, very much is another mechanism where we can leverage some of the public-private partnerships that have been happening in the UK through the Asset Management Task Force, which is a ministerial led industry group that's produced some quite interesting blueprint model for fund tokenization. There was another report relatively recently on AI as well. So the opportunity to bring in some of that into the international forum to play a role with international regulators and with international industry participants is fantastic.
Thank you. I'm starting to get questions. Probably a good time to segue to the next piece, which is kind of the work that you're doing. But I'll just read out some questions and maybe we'll take this chance to address some of the questions that came from the audience. For example, will there be a Project Guardian 2? So I think maybe just for the interest of the audience, we started Project Guardian, and Fernando, I think you can probably add on to this as well. We started Project Guardian with maybe one initial project, one initial pilot, and one initial trade. But I think what has evolved is actually Project Guardian potentially be described better maybe as a program of different projects. So I think that's probably how you see it. And I don't think we've really have a phase 2 or V2. I think arguably it's just a continuous process. So I think of Guardian as an ongoing initiative with many different trials, pilots, etc., collaboration on different fronts. So I think that's probably how we look at it. The other piece, which I think I'll leave you to maybe answer this, which is, I guess, a question around when will Project Guardian move from pilot to full commercialization? So I think, Fernando, I think you'll probably be a good person to start with, just speaking about the work that is being done. I think there's a question, is it really just proof of concept, we're just writing a paper, or is it real and in production? Are you commercializing it? So do you want to take that as a first question, perhaps?
Yes, thank you. Actually, it is real. You're in the process of commercializing some of the products that we showcase in Project Guardian during the last 2 years. And our initial focus is going to be the so-called RWA. It's actually an asset-backed security. That's the term that we use from the TriFi world. And this ABS is going to have a note or fixed income-like wrapper. When it came to choosing the right jurisdiction for the issuance, we chose Switzerland, and we're discussing that with Sarah. The reason for that is they already have the DLT law, they're extremely prescriptive. You know what you need to do the issuance, right, and be able to track ownership of that token as it's traded, right, along the whole life cycle. And the challenge for us is that once you have that, structure, let's say in Switzerland, we, SBI, as a Tokyo-based financial conglomerate, we want to distribute to retail investors in Japan. And when it comes to distribution to retail, the suitability requirements are pretty high. And when you tell your regulator that, this is a note or it's actually a certificate, and by the way, it's tokenized, everything's going to be fine. That conversation is not that easy. Let's leave it at that. So It's not only on the origination side where you spend a lot of time choosing the right jurisdiction, it's also on the distribution side. You need to find a jurisdiction where the regulator understands the implications of distributing something in a tokenized format. So, I mean, Singapore is one such jurisdiction we are looking at for distribution. Switzerland itself, of course, can be used, and then we are in discussion with other unnamed regulators in ASEAN. And when it comes to Japan, we're still working on it. So again, the commercialization is there. You will see so a number of big announcements in the next few weeks, because again, we are already onboarding some clients and partners. But for us to do this at a scale, we need a further regulatory alignment between jurisdictions. And I was also discussing this with Sarah. I'm going to quote you. We need to have maybe a taxonomy of the legal constructs for the issuance of tokenized securities, and then be able to map it out to other jurisdictions. Because there might not be 100% alignment in all cases. I don't think that's realistic. But we map that out, and I think we can finally have actual global markets with global origination and global distribution.
Yeah, if I may just add, I think when you look at Project Guardian, for some of you who may be aware of Project Ubin was really about how do you deal with using blockchain technology to move money instantly for cross-border payment. Project Guardian, the way I looked at it, is really about how do you use the digital technology of blockchain and smart contract to enable a much more efficient financial market infrastructure for the capital markets, which includes bonds and equities, funds, and everything else that is being traded right now. This is a pretty big agenda. From the DBS perspective, we have issued tokenized digital bonds on our digital exchange. One of the biggest issues is also about consumer education. You can do a lot of things with the technology. And the technology is here, we can use it, but the consumer education is another big piece that needs to be done because people don't really understand. There are also some accounting rules that needs to be changed. So I recall, in 2023 when we did the digital bond that was issued by UBS, DBS bought it, we repo it out to SBI. Yep. In return, we get a digital yen. The accounting standard says that we're supposed to keep the digital yen as an inventory. It's not cash. I mean, that's really weird. It's money. Yep. But the accounting rules hasn't caught up. So not only the regulators, I think we also need the accounting bodies to come together to help us. Because commercialization is not difficult, but if we can get these basic things cleared, then I think the adoption is going to be quite fast because the efficiency that all of us see is instant, right? It's about smart contract technology, it's about tokenization, and these things can be easily done. So once you clear that, I think commercialization in a very, very big way is going to be much faster. And Fernando doesn't need to jump around, look for regulators to be friendly for you to go commercial.
Peter, please.
So I was probably going to reflect on, I probably look at it in two lenses because I'm a user of the assets. So I've tested buying and trading the digital assets that have been prepared. I'm also somebody who then creates an asset in itself, which is the portfolio that wraps it, which is a fund, and then I tokenize that. Today we call it units, tomorrow we call it tokens. It's still fractionalizing the ownership. So I guess what we've learned through the process of Guardian, which is the proof of concept phase, is that we need the layers below us to deliver the capital market services, but also that I think we tried initially to look at a token over the top of maybe existing constructs, including rules and regulations. And I think our reflection on that at the beginning of the year was really in order to get the network effect, we needed to create what we would describe, and as in our paper we issued about the future of funds, is a composable framework. And I think we will all benefit from that composability going forwards. And we were talking in the green room around, just a simple example is investor tax rates in Singapore, for example, for certain type of investors and what they can invest in. We would argue now that that should be a contract, a smart token, it could be an NFT, that we all access, whether it be for initial issuance or for the fund buying that, or for the wealth management lens who's got the client. Today, that sits in multiple applications, in multiple layers, replicated multiple times. If everyone just simply used the contract, there is huge efficiency and scale from doing that. I think to answer the question about how do you commercialize something, I think we've realized that really you have to address the value chain front to back. And that's how you get the real benefit of the technology. I think we've learned that with AI. We've tried using AI in isolated use cases, reading documents and things like that, like our own prospectuses. We were wanting to pull out certain items. It was actually giving us everything. And so we were losing the benefit. So I think there's a benefit in looking front to back, left to right. So we did a pilot last year ourselves within our own organization. It was Swiss and Guernsey based, where we tokenized an insurance-linked security. We partnered with Hanover Re. We bought it within our own staff, and we used the DeFi technology network. Relatively, this is not and I guess what I'm going to say is this is not a technology problem. The technology is available and is ready to scale. The issue is how we put it together and how we get the regulators to understand how we put it together. And I'm going to say it's symmetry with today. It's very similar, different language, but it actually creates the same, and I was going to use the same comment, which is an outcome. I think the outcomes are actually pretty similar, and the outcome we want to deliver to our client is similar, and I would hope at a lower price point. So I guess our road to commercialization is we believe that we should take that proof of concept and now roll it out. So we're working on actually tokenizing another much larger contract and putting it into a fund in Luxembourg. So it's about a 10 million risk. And then we're working with the MES to really use the ILS proof of concept and commercialize it in this region. It's an underserved asset class. It actually isn't, I'm going to use the word, there is no technical capability there. It's very manual. It's not in any system. So there's a benefit in going with something digital first and enabling that end-to-end value chain and working with partners in the region. So we think we're ready to stop the proof of concepts and now use a use case where you can go end-to-end and really develop that marketplace and create the marketplace for the first time in a region. And clearly we would argue using Singapore as a hub is a perfect place to do that.
And Sarah, just from a regulator's perspective, what are some of your learnings and reflections? I think you've touched upon it briefly, but if you can expound on it.
Of course. Well, first point I was going to make has been already made by my colleagues on the sofa, which is I do think that 2025 will be the year of product launches, not just pilots. But I think pilots and use cases are so instructive in that learning that has been talked about by others just before me. I think focusing on outcomes is really important when we think about the regulatory framework. We, through the Asset Management Task Force work, that Blueprint for Tokenization report that I referred to earlier, concluded actually that in the UK there were no real regulatory barriers to development of tokenization in the funds industry, but you have to go through that level of specificity in a really open way with industry, well, actually co-led by industry participants to get you to that point. And I think then you leverage that learning and you think, okay, well, what does that mean going forwards, and how can we, there will inevitably always be parts of a rule set that are not, we talk about being technology neutral as a regulator, but of course rules were written in a time when nobody was talking about fund tokenization. So how can we use that learnings and then think, okay, what changes need to be made, and where do we not need to make any changes whatsoever, because we can focus on the outcomes. One thing I just wanted to highlight is that's launched relatively recently in the UK at the end of September is the Digital Security Sandbox. Now, look, we have a lot of sandboxes in the regulatory architecture in the FCA, but this is quite a new and novel one in the sense that it enables rules to be switched off for a period of time, whilst we then test and learn to then inform what a future state might need to be made. Existing sandboxes enable you to test new business propositions against the current rule set, but this is quite significant. And then the sort of final point, actually, which is very much why I'm here in Singapore, is the ability to have this conversation and then think internationally, because of course that is how you all operate, and very much seeking to work with Maz, looking at use cases between Singapore and the UK, and looking forward to doing that in 2025.
Likewise.
I was going to say, I guess we've all believed from the start that this will be a global infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we want it to be global infrastructure. And I go so far as to say we need it to be global infrastructure, which is why we encourage you all to join together and work on that. Yeah. And if we can agree on a framework and a set of principles that allows us to do this, then that's how we scale this business quickly.
Yep. Fernando, please.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on something that Peter said regarding the end-to-end value chain. I do agree that for this to be meaningful, it has to be done end-to-end. To do that within a country, I mean, it's not easy, but it's kind of doable. But when you start operationalizing what we call global distribution corridors, then you get all the discrepancies, right, between regulations. But it might look daunting to a lot of people, but it's important to keep in mind that the whole thing has to be digitized end-to-end, but tokenization does not need to be end-to-end from day one. In many cases, the buy side, and I don't have anything against the buy side, Peter, and they are not quite ready to buy something in a tokenized format. But now you have global custodians who can hold the tokens for you. So there are some cases where you can do the tokenization from issuance until the custodian, right? And then the buy side, they don't need to know that the thing has actually been tokenized, right? So there's no need to panic. And the likes of the SPI, the digital know how to do that. It's not only us, right? There are many others who start to offer this kind of services, so you can get a feeling of the benefits of using, tokenized securities and other asset classes.
So I guess we're getting questions also about how this would coexist with existing financial infrastructure or existing systems. Does any of you want to kind of jump into that?
Happy to go with that one. My honest opinion is I'm not sure it coexists well, would be my view, largely because I think one of the things we haven't touched on is that fundamentally behind this, in our opinion, there's going to be this demographic change here, which is so ultimately today we tend to have the way governments, people, etc., have saved is in saving schemes or pensions or their own particular tax-wrapped vehicles. And over time, we think that as that wealth transitions to the children, they will fundamentally go to a digitally native solution. And so we've got to think about different ways in which they invest, they bank, they get insurance, etc. And that transition is probably going to happen in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And again, AI is just going to speed that up. So we think there's this legacy world where there are some efficiencies and scales to be had. You'll see people who have tokenized money market funds. We have certainly tried to use that as collateral. It's being used in the DeFi space as well. So there are use cases for the technology in the legacy world. But I think making the changes there rather than building what we describe as new and getting the full benefits of the value chain, you only actually add a sort of an incremental benefit to the legacy platform. Whereas by addressing the whole value chain, you get the full benefit, and then you can pass the full benefit of that onto the client. And that's because our fundamental belief is this will be delivered to a client on an individual basis rather than through institutions that we've typically seen in the past. Yeah. And that transition has to happen and is not easy from the legacy toolkit. So I think there are benefits, but you need to go straight to what we would call straight to strategic solutions to really extract the full benefit.
So I guess to answer the question directly, which talks about existing infrastructure for foreign exchange transactions, I think if you look at that, there are already two applications that are happening side by side with the current infrastructure. So one of it is, I don't know how many of you run large regional treasury centers or global treasury centers. In these setups, there are a lot of intra-company transactions that needs to be settled, and they are foreign currencies that the in-house bank are supposed to manage for the entire group. So with smart contract, tokenized, we call it tokenized treasury or treasury tokens, you could use that to instantly help the settlement in the currencies that are needed to be done in an in-house bank concept. And this is done in parallel to, obviously, the external market infrastructure, but this allows companies to do intra-transactions 24/7, even weekends. And that's where the power of a centralized treasury is able to manage that position and deal with that. So blockchain is a technology with smart contract that allows large treasury organizations to manage this. Now, on the external side, DBS is involved with Patio. We are one of the founding members. And in Patio, we are looking at the FX PVP, payment versus payment for FX. And we know CLS transactions are largely on that basis, but a lot of the currencies are not on CLS. So there are solutions out there that are being worked on that will allow for that to be done. There are commercial conversations right now, and that doesn't have to wait for Guardian to materialize, because in the FX world, it's quite easy to do that. And that is indeed one of the first use cases where you can use blockchain to do payment versus payment settlement, which is so painful today in the interbank market.
And adding what Kwee just said, I would like to mention that on the treasury management side, now we started to see vendors, software vendors, integrating blockchain into their treasury management systems.
That's right.
So I think that's a game changer. So even you're not a big bank with a big IT team who can develop everything in-house, and now you can rely on your traditional vendors, right, who provide the TMS for you. So I think that's a rubber stamp from also the software development side of things. That's right. From ISVs.
Yeah.
And maybe just to continue on the line of thinking, right? So Fernando, what can, I guess, the audience expect from SBI in the year ahead? Just on that as well.
So in our case, we've been focusing on building the whole value chain end-to-end across a number of corridors. As of today, we have Japan and Singapore, Switzerland, and Switzerland, Japan fully operationalized. So if anyone in this audience needs help on the origination distribution side, we are ready to help. Again, this is a global play. It's not just about the three corridors. I was having a chat with Sarah. We'd like to add the UK, EU. You're already in talks with regulators in Thailand and other markets in the region. Again, we are ready, but to build this full value chain end-to-end, we need to work on a per corridor basis to make sure that things do not break. And we're also working with ISVs, independent software vendors, so that they integrate whatever we build with the treasury management systems and other back office solutions that banks need to operate and to be able to interact with us natively.
And Kwee, other than FX, what else can we expect from DBS?
So for us, there are a few things that we're focused on. One, which is this enabling international treasury centers to manage their treasury a lot better on the FX position. So we have launched this treasury token solution. We did that with Ant to help them with their global operations. And we think that's very scalable because it's based on smart contract and blockchain. The second thing that we've been doing is we have been using the Patio network to allow us to do instant 24/7 payment for US dollars, Sing dollars, and soon to be euros. So that is a rail that we use for our customers to do that settlement. And there is a potential for us to use that for US dollars as well into consumer accounts in the US for instant settlement. And the last one that we are looking at is, as you know, we've done tokenization of bonds. To Peter's point, in the private market, we do think that there is opportunity to tokenize private debt, private equity, and put that out onto our exchange for customers to invest. That again is something that we are quite excited about, because we do think that there is greater understanding of that asset class, and maybe fund managers will start to look at it and say this is going to be helpful. So that's something that we are quite excited about.
So Peter, ILS, anything else?
No more proof of concepts. I would say focus on the composable finance framework, really, which is, I guess, as a buy side, I need that composable framework to deliver my services. There's engaging with the rest of that asset wealth management community and the rest of the Guardian network to make sure we can deliver that. And then engaging, certainly in the UK, on certainly knowledge transfer, and there are other digital issuances coming up that we expect to participate as well. So continue the education and continue the experimentation with the asset classes.
And Sarah, you probably we'll let you have the last words on this, just in terms of key priorities, key areas. I think we spoke about a few areas that we think we could focus on next year. Just for the audience, any specific areas, particularly on we talked about different benefits of tokenization here and use cases, subsectors, but any specific areas?
Yeah, so I think in the policymakers group that we're part of, it's to support the move from pilots to launches. And then I think the other interesting angle is how do we leverage what we've learned in Guardian to a broader international audience, so through international standard setting bodies, IOSCO, and others. And I think the involvement of international regulators in Guardian provides the opportunity then to be able to leverage that out. So really excited to see how it develops, and actually being informed by how you are thinking about it from industry. One point we haven't touched on much today is the sort of what's the end goal in terms of retail access, and then I think obviously regulators will look at things from a consumer protection perspective, but equally, or if not more important, is also how do we clearly explain what it is, and then there's that opens up a whole different panel on financial literacy and financial education, which will take you well beyond your time slot and isn't for today.
Well, one last thing I would just say is that we probably ran out of time, but if anyone is interested to find out more on individual pilots, frameworks they have developed, we do have a booth, Future of Finance booth, at Hall 3, just around the corner. So please stop by. I think we'll have representatives from your organizations going to be speaking on this different pilots and efforts that's been undertaken. So please check it out. With that, please join me in thanking my esteemed panel, and thank you for the audience for your very kind attention and participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan, and your fantastic panelists. How great to hear how Project Guardian has really made